that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine. Hello everybody, and welcome to sandworms, worms, lots and lots of worms. So I powered through because I really need to reread the original novel before part 2 of Dune comes out, which is coming out in March, which is basically just the second book of the novel. But thereby, once that comes out, part 1 and part 2 will equal one whole of a story. But I wanted to finish the prequel books that I've been slow on because I haven't been particularly fond of this most recent one. So today I have for you my review of Heir of Caladan by Brian Herbert, the son of Frank Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. Now, I've been a rather big proponent of these prequel books. I think that the Legends of Dune, the ones about the Butlerian Jihad and the war against the machines 10,000 years before the events of Dune, are legitimately, especially in some instances, on par with Dune's work. Now, other people may scoff at me and disregard that, but I genuinely feel that Legends of Dune specifically is on par with the mainline novels by Frank Herbert. Schools of Dune takes place after that, and it's about 80 years, or at least starts about 80 years after the events of the Legends of Dune trilogy. And that, I feel, is pretty solid, pretty good, like really good. However, I don't feel it rivals any. I mean, I've only read one book in the Frank Herbert run, but from what I know of, for me, it didn't surpass anything, or I didn't feel it was on par, but it was still really solid, much better than I was expecting, because I'd heard so many bad things. Then you jump ahead 10,000 years, and you get to the Houses trilogy, which is, decades before the events of the original Dune novel. So we get a young Leto Atreides, we get, Paulus Atreides, his father, and a bunch of stuff like that. And that one was much more of what I expected. It wasn't horrible by any means. It was pretty decent, but it was not the previous two trilogies. And it was much more of what I would expect from Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert collaboration. That's not to say it was bad, but it was noticeably lacking quality. But at the same time, that was the first thing they wrote together after the sequels they made. So this was very safe. But it was fine. I enjoyed it. This, what I'm reading now, came out before, but I read it in chronological order. So the next thing I read was Princess of Dune, which came out in 2023 in October. And it was solid. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't average, and it wasn't awful. It was good, but nowhere near the rank of the original novel. But it was good, and I enjoyed it for what it was. At least half of it, anyway. And then I started this trilogy. And I started with Duke of Caladan, and I was generally really impressed with the story, everything about it. I mean, Paul was kind of boring, the Jessica stuff was intriguing, and Paul, and then Leto himself, and everything going on with Shaddam, and this new revolutionary faction that wanted to take over, plus dealing more with Chom, that was all fascinating, that was all intriguing, that was all wonderful. I was so into it. I'm like, how did they make something so interesting and so engaging a year before the novel? And I was really hyped in that first one, really, truly, ultimately impressed with that first novel. Then we got to Lady of Caladan. And while the main plot I still enjoyed with Jackson Naru and this revolutionary tale, Leto Atreides being harassed by this guy and, eventually trying to secretly join him so that way he can destroy him from the inside was great. I still enjoyed that. I still enjoyed the sections with Chom, because I've only read the first novel, but we don't get that much with Chom, the space Amazon of this franchise. So getting to see the inner workings, now they also had problems with Shaddam, and what they were up to was really fascinating and interesting. However, a good portion of the book was given to Paul. You can't do much with Paul, because his story truly begins in Dune. Whereas I felt like you read the original Dune novel, you see Leto Atreides, you feel like, how did he become the man that he is? How did he become this upstanding guy? And then he dies. Spoilers. So it leaves you wanting more. But we get a full story with Paul, so we don't need that. It's not horrible, it's not badly written, but who cares? Who cares? One thing I will give this book, the original novels already did it fine, but it gave us more with Duncan and Paul, so you feel more of that friendship, more of that kinship, so that way you feel harder in the original novel. Jessica's plot, I gotta be honest, I just don't care. She gets sent back to the sisterhood home, and I'm trying to be invested in that plot thread. I just don't care. And maybe that's just me, but I could not care less. The only thing I cared about was the main plot, and that was the smallest part of the second book. So I was not a fan of it. I was rather negative toward it. I don't like Lady of Caladan. So here we are at Heir to Caladan. By the name, you think it has a lot to do with Paul. It really doesn't. And the stuff we do get with Paul, again, is fine. Again, it highlights the friendship between Duncan and him, and that's great. Outside of that, I don't care. The Jessica stuff, slightly more interesting this time, but overall, I still don't care. But the main plot, which was introduced to us and was super intriguing in the first book, is really the center stage here, and basically the last 100 pages to 150 pages, it was rolling. It was good. It was great. I loved it. I have some grievances with certain stuff, but overall, it was pretty alright. But here's the problem. 3 books for this story. If this had been one book that was 700 pages, it probably would have been pretty stellar. You cut out all the fluff. Oh, did I mention the Baron Harkonnen? Oh, no, because they don't matter. It doesn't matter. Raban, Feyd-Rautha, Baron, redundant stuff. You don't care. Because all their stuff's coming in the next book. Anyway, but I like the ending with Jackson Naru and what happens to him and what happens to Chom and everything. That was all great. That was all good. I just wish it was a single novel or a duology. 3 books was far too much for what the story just, it doesn't have enough meat to provide 3 stories. It doesn't. So, yeah, is there anything I tell you that aren't really spoilers? Gurney's tortured and he gets captured early on in the story. It doesn't really matter outside of the fact that I guess this further helps develop that, Gurney really hates them because he says that in the book and in the movie. And you're like, why did you say that? Well, we already had all that backstory in Houses of Dune, but if that wasn't enough, we have this here to further illustrate why he thinks that they're ruthless, because he was not only did the people he cared about die from them, he also got physically assaulted. One cool part, I guess I'll say, that's slightly spoilerish, is that Thufir, even though he's old, goes and saves him, because he doesn't go a whole military act, because that's going to cause a whole political thing. So he stealthily goes in, Metal Gear Solid saves him, and that was pretty epic, not gonna lie. One plot thread I thought they were going to go with here, but they didn't, is that I thought, because Leto went undercover, that there was going to be not enough proof to convict him, but enough to where, even though he didn't, that Shaddam would be forever untrustworthy of him. Just think the worst of him. And so the next book would make more sense. But that's not what happens. he gets mad at the Baron by the end of the book and gives Arrakis to the Atreides. So it basically starts right where Dune begins. But Dune, if not outright, blatantly and very heavily seems to be trying to tell us that it was Shaddam and the Baron working together. Now, he says in the book he can always change his mind. Maybe he does, like right before the events of the main book, and then he conspires with the Baron. But it's just weird to have him not be upset with Leto by the end of this. Why you have this starting like right where the next book begins? Why aren't you having him be mad at Leto? It just doesn't make sense. So I wasn't a big fan of that either. Yue, his wife got stolen in the last book, so there's some really nice like sorrowful and regretful, mournful moments from Yue as he realizes what he's gonna have to do, which we won't see until the next book. But still, there's a lot of stuff like that. That was really some great character moments there between him. But overall, like, I don't know, man. This shouldn't have been a trilogy. You shouldn't make a trilogy right before Dune. And I know like Matt's like a fan of these and stuff, and the only ones he dislikes is like Winds of Dune, which I haven't even read yet, which we'll get to eventually. I don't know. It started off really strong, but I think 3 books was too much. And I always try to be positive, and I always try to love everything I read, despite people saying that I just love things blindly, and don't ever critique anything, and that I'm just always peachy, go lucky, happy about everything I ever read ever. No, I try to be genuine and honest with everything I read. Like, and sometimes I'll like something that you won't like, or sometimes I'll like something that you don't like, and that's okay. But I try really hard to be positive and like most things I read. I mean, why do you want to read something and not like it, right? But I have to be honest with my feelings here, and I just didn't. There's aspects to all 3 of these which I do enjoy, but overall, as a package, I just don't like this trilogy. And I hate to say that because I've been a really big defender of Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert's work in the Dune franchise. I really enjoy what they offer when they're on their A game. But, Marcel, my friend, had joked with me once about Princess of Dune being a cash grab. Whether it was or not doesn't matter. But I find it hard pressed to not think of this as kind of a cash grab because this came out like right before Dune Part 1. But it's just so unnecessary. And unnecessary is fine. Like, Princess of Dune didn't need to exist either, but it told a fun little story in a span of like 300 pages, and it was only one novel. But 3? It just didn't need to happen. So I'm left, do I recommend this trilogy? Not really. Unless you're like a hardcore Dune fan who needs to read everything like I am, then yeah. But otherwise, you have the Legends of Dune trilogy, which is just absolutely stellar. You have the Schools of Dune trilogy, which is also pretty solid. And then you have the House trilogy, which it may be weaker in quality, but it's still pretty decent and a good little prequel, an actual like good little prequel to the Dune book itself. Giving us backstories on Jessica and Paul and Leto and everything. So I just I just can't get in good faith recommend this one to you, unless you're a hardcore completionist. It's not a horrible ride. It's not written badly. It's not a terrible story, but it drags, and it's just ultimately we didn't need this. Anyway, next time I will reread Dune and get myself prepared for March when Dune Part 2 comes out in theaters. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Sorry to be negative Nancy. I try to be really positive. I try to love everything, but I have to be honest when I'm feeling a certain way. So that's how I'm feeling about this. But, still form your own opinions and check it out if it seems somewhat interesting to you. But I found myself struggling. But that's pretty much it, guys. Next time we read the original Dune novel by Frank Herbert, Dune. A sci-fi classic. Until next time, guys. Walk with rhythm. Bye-bye.